I came to work and they asked me to go up to the Human Resources. So I went up there and they had drug testing, said random drug testing going on. And so I went in there and I let them know that I have a medical marijuana card and I'm not going to pass this. I came in on Monday and my door swipe that opens the door wouldn't open the door. And they told me that, that they're going to terminate my employment, because they decided that, that they're not going to allow people who have medical marijuana license to work for them.
That right there was an interview with the Denver Post with a guy named Brandon Coates, a quadriplegic and a former employee of the Dish Network who was fired for using medical marijuana. He had a state prescription for that medical marijuana.
He did, and on Monday, as we mentioned here on Newsmax Now, the Colorado Supreme Court ruled an employer's zero tolerance policy trumps state medical marijuana laws, and that's a great place now to bring in our roundtable. And we want to welcome Newsday columnist Ellis Henican, also joining us, political commentator Lisa Durden, host of the Lisa Durden Radio Show. Thank you both for joining us here today.
Hey, Miranda.
All right, Lisa, thanks for being with us. Welcome to the show here. This exposes, I think, though, a big issue when it comes to states experimenting with their own drug policies here. Of course, it's illegal on the federal level. Does this perhaps show us a sign that this needs to be remedied on the federal level, not just on the state level?
Absolutely. It concerns me that on the local level, you approve individuals to use medical marijuana and then you turn around and arrest them for it. So if I go to the liquor store and buy legal alcohol, am I going to be arrested for it? So that's a severe problem. So those two things have to be married. So if the federal government is not going to support the local government, then I think we have a severe problem. So you're actually criminalizing something that was decriminalized. That's a severe issue. And then my question becomes, are the black folks going to get arrested more than the white folks? And then are we going to get 10 years for one joint? I don't understand how that's going to work.
Well, Ellis, that's an interesting hypothesis there. Do you think that companies might selectively use this type of these types of drug tests to weed out employees that they may not like, whether it be color, race, sex, sexual orientation? What do you think?
Oh, well, sure, companies do bad things all the time. Thankfully, in this case, the quadriplegic was not arrested. He was just had problems at his job. So maybe we do need to make that distinction. Listen, I am very suspicious of this expansion of the way that employers try to control the personal lives of people who work there. I mean, there are companies that say you can't smoke cigarettes or you can't drive a motorcycle, and maybe some places that say you have to go to church or maybe you can't go to church. At some point, it seems to me that courts have got to get a grip on that issue and say, hey, what you do at work can be something that you're judged by, but what you do on your personal life ought to not be your boss's judgment. And this decision, sadly, kind of creeps down that road a little bit.
Unless, though, Ellison, it's illegal, right, Miranda?
Right, and now according to the Colorado Supreme Court Justice Allison H. Eade, wrote this opinion on the case. This is what she said: employees who engage in an activity such as medical marijuana that is permitted by state law but unlawful under federal law are not prosecuted or protected, by the statute. So it does open up the door to other things that you were mentioning about drinking in your pastime or smoking in your pastime. Where do we draw that line? And bear in mind now, 23 states and D.C. allow medical marijuana. Here's the question I have, though, for you, Lisa. His attorney asked for a narrow ruling. Coates was not working in a hazardous condition. He was answering phones for the Dish Network.
Absolutely.
Shouldn't there be an exception in that case, at the very least?
At the very least, I might want to maybe think about it if it was somebody like a doctor or someone who's driving a public vehicle like a bus or flying a plane or handling children in some way. Then maybe we would have a really good debate. But this guy wasn't doing that. And then I'm going to push it as far as saying, if we let individuals in the workplace not only smoke, but they stand outside and smoke right in front of the door, then this man should be able to take his joint and smoke right outside in front of the door. It's legal.
Ellis, what do you think?
So that shows that there is a disparity between, what we call, nicotine is a drug and so is marijuana. So why is it that it's okay for us to smoke nicotine in front of the store or in front of the job and not marijuana? So you see that there is a definite difference in how they treat people who are medical marijuana. Are you really okay with them doing it, or do you really judge them behind the scenes?
Ellis, I want to get your thoughts. We only have
Well,
a few more seconds remaining for this.
Listen,
edition
this
of our
is a
roundtable.
little bit, Miranda, a little bit of a unique case because you have this conflict of law here where something is illegal still for the feds, legal under the state law. So I don't see this exact issue coming up a whole lot of many times in terms of these court decisions, but the principle still very much does maintain. How far can your boss go in running your personal life? And I got to tell you, some of these bosses are going awfully far. We got to reel this in somehow or another, I think.
Yeah,
And I'm
makes
really
you wonder,
afraid,
guys,
as an African American,
Go ahead, Lisa, real quick. We got about 5 seconds.
I'm really afraid. Okay, I'm really afraid as an African American because if this thing it catches legs, then this is going to be another way to put more African American males in jail. And Black Lives Matter. I don't want to see someone getting bust over the head or choked by a cop.
All right,
because
Lisa,
they have
hold that
medical
thought
marijuana.
because we'll continue this conversation on the other side of this commercial break. Stay with us.
And we want to welcome back in our roundtable, Ellis Henican and Lisa Durden. Thanks so much for staying with us.
All right, before we go back and talk a little bit more about Jeb Bush and Donald Trump, the big announcement today, Lisa, I want to kind of reel this conversation back in a little bit. We do want to point out that the guy in question here, the quadriplegic, is white. I understand your concerns, and there is an alarming amount of black men incarcerated in this country, but nobody was arrested here. We just want to be clear on that. I do appreciate your concerns, but this is not a racial issue at this point. I think it's a little bit too far, bridge too far to jump to a racial conclusion on this point, but we do appreciate your viewpoint, and Ellis, especially yours too, because this is a concern. How far can your employer go into your personal life? But let's move on, guys, talk a little bit more about the big Jeb Bush announcement yesterday. The former Florida governor announced his candidacy for 2016. The Week, though, has a new article about him entitled, quote, Jeb Bush and the most preposterous phrase in politics. Here's a little snippet from it. Why do politicians keep serving us in this particular helping of balderdash, and why do we believe them? Bush could be barely more wrong on both parts of his message. He's no outsider, and more importantly, no outsider could do what they always tell us that they'll do. Even insiders may not be able to. So George Bush, Lisa, painting himself as a political outsider, is that the most preposterous statement in the 2016 election cycle?
That is a disaster, and all of us know that he's not. I'm a Democrat, and I know that. So,
Alice, what about you? What do you think about
where he's going with that?
What do you think about Jeb Bush trying to paint himself as an outsider? Even if you like the guy, you got to say this might be going a little bit too far.
I'm trying to think of a good analogy. It's like Donald Trump claiming to be poor. Maybe.
Right.
Oh, no, I got a better one. Donald Trump claiming to have good hair. How about that?
But you could probably
It ain't gonna happen.
argue.
Nobody's going to believe it.
Right.
Nobody's going to believe it. Come on.
Outsider may be going too far, but talking to people who claim to be very conservative Republicans would say Jeb is not one of them.
That's a fair
They would
point.
say
He's certainly trying
they
to
would
run as a
definitely call
different
him
kind
much more of a
Republican.
moderate, very different from his dad or brother, even the establishment when it comes to the established Republican Party. I think that's probably a fair assessment. Wouldn't you agree, Ellis?
Yeah, Miranda, here's the problem he's got, right? I mean, in many ways, he would be a very strong general election candidate against the Democrat because he has pushed to the middle a little compared to some of these other folks in the Republican line. But getting through the primaries and caucuses is going to be really tough for him. I mean, they're painting him out to being too soft on immigration, to being supportive of Common Core, to being frankly, just not conservative enough for the hardcore Republican base. And that really may be the toughest gauntlet that he has to walk.
But I actually think
And I
this is
think what he's trying to
Go ahead, Lisa.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say what I think Jeb Bush is trying to do is rebrand himself from the debacle of the election that he tried to steal for his brother. So I think he's trying to rebrand himself and reach out to a different audience who actually he disenfranchised back then. So that's a little game I think he's trying to play that it's probably not going to work. It's going to blow up in his face.
Again, Lisa, point of order real quickly, just to note that the Supreme Court did rule in on that case, so it wasn't necessarily Jeb Bush's doing. But to your point, Ellis, when Jeb Bush talks about these, and your point as well, Miranda, when he talks about these moderate or ideas of immigration reform, all he has to do, though, is say, well, look what I did when I was governor. Because he has a very conservative record as a Florida governor here, right-to-life things. He was very focused on education in the state of Florida,
Cut taxes.
balance the budget, cut taxes. So I think it's a very smart play for Jeb Bush to put himself out here on these issues and make everybody think he's running this general election campaign. But the questions are always going to focus back on, well, look what I did as governor.
Right,
No,
exactly.
you're right, John. Listen, from where I sit, the guy seems really conservative. I mean, he's to me, his credentials are almost unquestioned. However, don't forget who the hardcore of this electorate is. I mean, they are undeniably to the right of Jeb Bush. If you lined up all these candidates in ideological order, he would. I mean, he'd be certainly one of the one or two most moderate in the entire.
Based
in
on
the
record
entire
alone,
field, wouldn't he?
He would be, based on his record. And I know he'll talk a lot about that. Ellis Henican, we want to thank you so much, as well as Lisa Durden, a new guest on our show. We'll have you back.
Thank you. Thank you very
Good to
much.
see you
Thanks for
guys.
inviting me.